Hi, I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief of pharmaphorum. I'm here at ASCO 24 with Dr. Suzanne Trudel, the principal investigator on the DREAM8 study. Thanks for joining me.
Happy to join you.
So DREAM8 is one of the really big abstracts, one of the ones everybody's talking about. Give us kind of the rundown on what you were looking at and what the findings were.
Sure. In myeloma currently, we routinely use triplet and quadruplet therapies for newly diagnosed myeloma patients. And what that means is that when patients first relapse, that they are exposed and many will be refractory to all three major classes of drugs that we use to treat myeloma. And so really this highlights the need for new treatments that incorporate drugs that have a novel mechanism of action. So the DREAM8 study was really meant to address this gap. And so what we've done is we've developed a phase 3 study that is randomized, and patients are either receiving belantamab mafodotin, which is an antibody-drug conjugate that targets BCMA, with pomalidomide and dexamethasone, and we're comparing it to a standard of care, pomalidomide, bortezomib, dexamethasone in that study. And what we found was, the patient population, I should say, are patients, as I mentioned, who have had one or more prior lines of therapy and must have had lenalidomide, because the majority of our patients, when they do progress, are lenalidomide exposed and many refractory. So what we found was that the study met its primary endpoint of progression-free survival. There was a reduction in the risk of progression and death by about twofold in the patients who had belantamab mafodotin, or belamaf, I like to call it, with pomalidomide and dexamethasone compared to the control arm. And not only that, but there was a benefit favoring Bela PD in all the pre-specified subgroups that we looked at, and all the secondary endpoints, depth of response, duration of response, progression-free survival too, all favored Bela PD arm. There was, although the overall survival data is immature, there was a trend to improvement in the overall survival, the hazard ratio of 0.77. And that comes despite, patients, once they progress, in the POM Velcade arm having effective anti-myeloma therapies at that point in time. And then finally, I covered some of the toxicities that we see in this study. And we found that in the patients who had pomalidomide plus belamaf and dexamethasone, the safety profile was consistent with what we would expect with those individual agents. And the most commonly reported adverse event was ocular toxicities, which are commonly seen with these MMAF-containing ADCs. That was observed in about 90% of patients. But we found that this was almost always patients improved when we held the drug, and it was most patients recovered back to baseline with dose holds and were able to be retreated again. So overall, we really see a really robust efficacy of the drug with manageable safety. And the important thing with this particular ADC and this particular drug is that it is off the shelf and can be given in community centers, so it has lots of convenience associated with it in addition to the safety and efficacy.
So it's a drug that's already in the market, it's already being used.
Oh, so it has a long history there. So it was originally given expedited approval by the FDA, and then that was conditional on a positive phase 3 study. And unfortunately, the first phase 3 study compared single agent belantamab mafodotin to pomalidomide and dexamethasone, and that study didn't meet its primary endpoint. So although the progression-free survival was 11 months for belamaf versus 7 months for PD or PomDex, that didn't meet statistical significance. So because of that, the drug was removed from the market in Europe and the US. And we hope now we actually have now 2 phase 3 studies of belantamab mafodotin in combinations, and both studies are showing very positive progression-free survival data. So we're hoping that will mean that the drugs will come back on the market.
Yeah, so a little bit of a comeback story.
Yeah, a little roller coaster up and down, but I think everything's looking very positive now.
So is the takeaway there just that it really needed to be in combination? or is it just that these studies were better designed or better
Well, I
powered?
think it's maybe a bit of both of those. I think there were some design issues with the original DREAM-3 study that was a negative study, but I do think the combinations are really exciting. I think that the part of the reason that we're seeing this PFS benefit is that when you put the three drugs together, responses are higher, they occur more quickly, and then one of the really interesting properties of belantamab mafodotin is that it really induces these very durable responses. So once you get patients to respond, and that is improved when you combine, then they really maintain their responses. So I think it's really a combination of all of those things.
So what does this mean for patients with myeloma and physicians that treat it? How is this going to change practice?
Yeah, so I think for patients with myeloma, options, we've made huge progress in the treatment of the disease, and a lot of that has come with the earlier use of our active agents in frontline. But then now what's happening is once patients relapse, the treatments, the standard treatments that we have now are much less effective. So we really need new drugs with new mechanisms of action to now move into second line. And I think that's sort of really filling this unmet need that we're now seeing from our success of treating with multiple agents up front. And for physician, it gives us more choices because now, this will be possibly the third, cilta-cel, which is a BCMA targeted agent, recently got approved second line in the US and Europe. And if these get approved, this gives us also an additional alternatives to use. So you can make a decision as to which of these different treatments you will use based on sort of patient factors, treatment factors, toxicities, and whatnot. So it gives us more options for treating our patients.
You've been at the conference for a few days now. How does this kind of fit into some of the other larger trends, other research you've been hearing about?
Yeah, I think as I said, I think it fits in a lot with sort of what we're seeing in the upfront studies for myeloma, really reinforcing this idea of using these anti-BCMA agents earlier and then however leaving this gap after. So we saw some exciting data with isatuximab in combination with RVD, demonstrating very high rates of MRD and progression-free survivals that look like they're going to be almost 7 years now. So that's a lot of progress we're making up front, but then leaving the gaps for second line, and this is where I think our study fits in. But also, a lot of excitements around this class of drugs that we're dealing with, the antibody-drug conjugates, not just in myeloma, but in other diseases, other types of cancers as well.
Almost across the board.
Yeah, exactly.
One question I've been asking everybody that I interview at the show: what advice would you have for a young person entering the field of oncology right now?
Oh, what advice would I have? I think it's a great area to be in. It's so exciting with all the new drugs and patients living longer with the treatments. I think it's very rewarding. So I think, getting in there, getting into the research, I think it adds even more to the practice of just seeing patients. I think it's a great field to be in.
Awesome. Anything else on your mind?
No, I think, it's an exciting place to be at this meeting. I haven't been in many years, and I'm really enjoying all the presentations that I've been able to attend.
Thanks so much for chatting with me, Dr. Trudel.
Thank you.